Welcome to our Enterprise Blockchain, the Path to Monetization workshop. My name is Guido Molinari, and I'm the managing partner at Prism Group. In today's workshop, we are going to be discussing with a number of industry leaders that are going to be joining us over the next 3 hours. I'm going to be kicking things off with a brief introduction about us, Prism Group, and presenting a couple of frameworks that we can use when thinking about some of the insights that the various speakers are going to be sharing with us this afternoon. And then I'm going to be leading the first set of fireside chats, where we're going to have joining us Mariana Gomez de la Villa from ING Bank, Demetrio Migliorati from Banca Mediolanum, Olaf Ransome from Fnality International, and Riccardo Turbiani from Microsoft. After that, I'm going to be giving the floor to my colleague Rick Cataldo, who is going to be hosting a session with speakers joining us from Ireland and the US Coast. We're going to be having with us Tiara McGowan from WeTrade, Shyam Nagarajan from IBM, Chen Zher from Ernst & Young, and Daniel Wilson from TradeLens, and Mark Treshock from IBM Pharmaceutical Utility Network. After that, I'm going to be coming back, and with me, there's going to be another set of speakers joining us from the US Midwest and the Rockies. Among them, there's going to be Adam Kaplan from Salesforce, Merrick Vaz from United Healthcare, the Synaptic Health Alliance, and David Post from IBM, Trust Your Supplier. We're going to then take some key takeaways together with Kathy Barrera, our founding economist at Prism Group, and we're going to draw some conclusions together from today's workshop. So our next speaker is Olaf Ransome. Olaf is the industry solution advisor at Fnality International, and he's going to be joining us from Zurich. Fnality, as many of you know, was founded last year by 15 major financial groups, including Banco Santander, BNY Mellon, Credit Suisse, ING, NASDAQ, State Street, and UBS. And it's working actively with central banks around the world, including the European Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, the Central Bank of Canada, the UK, and Japan. Fnality came out of a multi-year research project called the Utility Settlement Coin that was led by technical firm Chlormatics. And they're aiming to bring payment on-chain in tomorrow wholesale banking markets. Welcome, Olaf. Thank you for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Guido. I hope you can hear me well.
Yes,
good.
Loud and clear.
Excellent. Thanks for having me.
So, Fnality is an extremely ambitious project. And, I read, a recent post from you mentioning that the estimate from Accenture for potential annual savings in the banking industry is $8 billion. Where do you think these savings can come from? And, what are, in your view, the main challenges around monetizing blockchain efforts to achieve these savings?
So I think let's start with the first part of the Accenture study. And Accenture have done everyone a favor with that. I think we can philosophize at length as to whether you have to use blockchain to get those savings. But the presence of blockchain and blockchain being discussed led to people looking at the art of the possible. How much process improvement could you achieve? So I think you first have to say thanks, Accenture, for doing that. And also to everybody looking at it going, hey, there are these very bad processes in banks. There are lots of rubbish processes in banks. Banks are destined to have to collaborate. And that's what you were talking about in the previous discussion and what Mariana referred to about this whole collaboration thing. We got this whole settlement piece. So there are many of these processes that we have to do that mean I have to send a message and you have to send a message and somebody has to check and go, yep, did these guys agree on it? So we've got some pretty kludgy processes, but those processes were only ever as efficient as the market infrastructure allows us to be. And what all that research has done is said, hey, there are some big improvements you can make. And I think the opportunity is to reimagine the processes and go right back up to the start of the process. Say, okay, for example, in trading, if two parties meet in an electronic venue, you could settle that transaction pretty much instantly. That's also where we think Fnality has a role to play by putting cash on ledger. We can help that instant settlement happen. If you did that, then a whole swathe of post-trade activity just disappears. So I think the challenge for the industry is to look at those processes and say, can we make that post-trade process smarter by applying the technology? On the monetizing side, it's difficult at the best of times to get banks to collaborate and focus. In previous discussion, the industry body had done a great job of bringing everybody together. Wonderful if you can do that. That doesn't always work, and it's not always so easy to organize, particularly when you're cross-border. And now we have the sense that banks will reduce their change the bank budgets, and trying to get them to focus on the collaborative things that are long-term. That's going to be the challenge. Expression that you used in the previous contribution was rails. When you build those first rails, there's not a big ROI. Yeah. You take some steps to get started. And I was actually having a conversation today with one of the reps from one of our shareholders saying, well, how can we help you understand that you need to invest in use cases for next year? So we're already having that discussion. What's on the schedule next year? And we came to the conclusion that actually in banks, you pretty much have to go all the way up to the CFO and the treasurer before you get anyone who takes a cross-bank view. Mm-hmm. Below that, everybody's got their goals, their short-term directives. And generally, if you ask a bank, would you like some money now versus money later? They'll go for money now. So our challenge with blockchain and process change is we need to collaborate, we need to agree, we need to build the rails, and you've got to find this glue to get everybody together. Our colleagues in Italy were so fortunate with Silvia's great work, the Italian Banking Association, where they said, yeah, collectively, let's lay these rails out. But that's extremely unusual. So that the challenge here is to get the banks to collaborate, to get them to focus, to get them to be long-term greedy and not short-term greedy.
And Olaf, thinking about, you mentioned focusing on money later. I know that you guys are gonna publish a calculator for people, and you mentioned this, and this is really focusing on intraday liquidity. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Actually, since we talked the other day, it is out. There's if anybody wants to look, you can go to the Fnality website or to Fnality's page on LinkedIn. There's a publication we put out about liquidity and how liquidity rather than money makes the wholesale banking world go round. It's one down from our birthday announcement. We were one yesterday. So it's slightly down if you go look for it. The liquidity thing goes like this. Liquidity has been an issue for the banks for the longest time because the way we've set up infrastructure, we have lots of places where we have to have money. So banks typically have lots of correspondent banking relationships. They have some RTGS relationships, central bank relationships, some custodian relationships. And if you're the treasurer, you're bucket man. You're just managing all these buckets all over the place. That infrastructure setup has a cost, which is the banks have to have liquidity buffers. And this has been particularly enforced since 2008 with the Lehman crash because liquidity killed Lehman or lack of it. That's all in Basel Pillar 2. And the folks at Wyman did us all a favor. They did a very nice study on this. And they said, hey, we've worked this out. Banks on average have 100 big banks, $100 billion in liquidity, and 10 to 30% of that is intraday. Just the reserves to make sure you've got the right money in the right place at the right time. We've heard recently that the GSIBs don't have 100 billion. They have an average of 230 and change billion. So that means let's assume our friends at Wyman are about right, 10 to 30%. And the 237 billion average is definitely true because that's in the FSB publications. That means big banks are spending $100 to $300 million a year on the insurance policy just to have the right money in the right place, right time. And the GSIBs are spending nearly 2.5 times that. That's a humongous number. And that's because the infrastructure is complicated. So what we're hoping to do in the long run with setting up the Fnality rails is to say, hey, we will set you up a payment capability that can do P, it can do PVP, it can do DVP, and you can connect many things to it. It's a single pool of liquidity. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, it generates this global collateral pool. And the global collateral pool has been a theme for many years. Right. The regulators worry about it. You know, a bank could have collateral here, but they can't get it to where they need it, so on. So what we've done in the article that people can go read on the website, we actually put in a little calculator. You can do your own numbers and say, hey, you know, if my liquidity number is this is what it means. If I believe capital's 12%, not 10%, this is what it means. Please go play around. I assure you, you'll be astounded by the number of zeros. And what that calculator will also tell you is how much it's worth if you can move the needle by 1%.
By 1%.
Make a 1% improvement. That's what it's worth to you. So go play around. Please try it out and talk to us about it. So we hope we're going to contribute to that 1% as time goes by.
No, that's super interesting, Olaf. And it's sort of one of the first time that we see a network putting out a tool for people to really see what's going to be the impact on their own monetization if they were to join the particular platform. Now, shifting the focus towards the current COVID crisis, you guys operate with you have shareholders from many different countries. You operate with central banks across different geographies, and we know that the outbreak has been global, but it has affected in different ways different regions. Do you feel this has overall slowed down the work? Have you seen different type of reaction among different stakeholders in Fnality? What has been your experience so far of the crisis?
Right. So amongst our shareholders, undoubtedly these moments are a speed bump. Teams get dispersed. People who are project managers working with us suddenly have to work hard to find their colleagues. So there's no getting around that. But there's some of that disruption. On the flip side of it, we're seeing with some of the shareholders that projects that otherwise might have been done aren't being done. So you kind of hope that that'll come good. Our own work with all our development, thanks, we've got a great tech team, and they've worked so hard with this. We've got some fantastic partners at Adara and EPAM and Broadridge who are helping us. That remote thing has pretty much worked. So there, on our own developments, we haven't really taken a hit. We haven't yet seen the central banks who are working with us on this whole approval process slow down. So we're still pretty good in that. I think the challenge will now come with the banks and next year's budgets. Can they, that comment from earlier, can they change the bank budgets? Can they find a way to not just grasp at the thing that will make them a bit of money in 2021? Do they want to build rails? That's a tough thing. We got 15 banks. We're going to do some more funding next year, almost for sure. So we've got this problem all over. And progress requires collaboration, right? The banks here have got the opportunity to do it. We need to get them to do it. It's a little harder than the situation our friends in Italy had. I wish it were that easy. I think we need to award ourselves certificates in herding cats.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, having the regulator as your friend from day one, it's a very, very strong position to be in, and getting it mandated. I mean, then you no longer leave the option there.
Project managers.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. And I invite everybody who's interested to go to the Fnality website and play with the calculator to see the immediate effect that you could have by joining a blockchain network. Again, thank you. Hopefully we'll do this in person next year in New York.
Thank you.
It was really a pleasure having you.
Thanks for inviting us. Bye-bye.
Bye.